Good morning, everybody. Um, Glad to see some people back from their live weekend excursions and having fun. I know the Ben and Eulalia and their kids are still gone there cabin this weekend. They're all back from Alaska, and Ben had some really awesome pictures to show them. But today we're going to talk about fasting and abstinence, mostly fasting though, as a spiritual discipline. And this is probably the one that people have been anticipating more, thinking about spiritual discipline besides, say, Bible reading or prayer. This is the one that people think about more. So before we get into that, what do we have to do first? Of course, yes. All right, so try it. Yeah, so train yourself in godliness for a while. Physical training in the body. Godliness is valuable in every way, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. First Timothy 4:70 through. Okay, so yeah, then so if you didn't know it, there it is. Um, Good one. So fasting. What is who? We all probably have fasted at some point in our life, whether it was for spiritual purposes or whether it was because we were stuck in the middle of nowhere with no food, or it was for a medical procedure or something. We've all probably, or it was to lose weight. I don't know. There's different reasons why people might fast today. And intermittent fasting is becoming more popular among people who might be trying to lose weight as well. So you might be more familiar with it than people that have a couple of decades ago. So the purpose of fasting for spiritual reasons is something we're going to be looking at in particular, not just fasting for physical health reasons. I'm sure there's all sorts of benefits that probably you, maybe some of you don't know that might being able to fast for something that's for medical reasons or so what are some reasons why we fast for spiritual purposes? Why is it that fasting is talked about as a spiritual practice? Going without food in this respect, but we can define fasting as going without a number of things. Why is fasting important? Yes.
I think part of it is so that when we feel hungry, we are reminded at the time to rely on God for it. I mean, it's a reminder to me, I think a physical reminder of our spiritual need, because that feeling of hunger should be a reminder that maybe at that time I need to remember what I'm relying on God for my physical as well as my spiritual well-being. And time to pray could be a reminder of time to pray, to give your time a moment to remember how vulnerable, who supplies us. And that's what I think when I fast,
Yeah.
what it does for me.
Yeah, fasting, whenever we realize our physical needs and how dependent we are, our bodies are dependent on food, it can be a sort of reminder to us about God as the ultimate supplier of those needs, the one who can satisfy those needs and desires. And so our flesh can be that sort of reminder for us, and so it can be an exercise in consciously reminding us as we get hungry and we miss a meal or two about our reliance on God. And as it's in Deuteronomy chapter 8, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And that's talking about when the Israelites only had manna in the wilderness and they had to rely upon God. And that lesson that he's teaching that God is the one who supplies their needs and their wants for their life. So it can function that way. What are some other reasons? Maybe purposes or things that make fasting spiritually beneficial. instead of just miserable.
You're demonstrating to God how seriously you're taking this.
Yeah, and it's a time of focus that you are taking things seriously. Now, it isn't just like trying to afflict ourselves and say, "Hey, God, pay attention to me," but it is a time where you are trying to. It is a way of seeking God. Not that you can't do that just normal prayer while you're eating or before you eat, but it is a special way of seeking out God in a specific. Um, so yeah, that is true. Any others before we kind of go on? Other biblical Bible verses about that. Okay. Well, sort of Rob said, it's an expression of love and devotion to God, but again, it can express a longing for God's presence. So in Matthew 9, let's turn to Matthew 9, 14 to 15. That's a good one. Okay. So would can I volunteer to read these two verses?
I'll read. So 14 and
15.
15. Okay. Then John's disciples came and asked him, "How is it that we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" Jesus answered, "How can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them. Then they will fast."
Yes. So here, how is this then expression of longing for God's presence? How might this be tied? What is the context for this passage? Especially, Jesus uses a wedding feast an analogy here. So, what is Jesus trying to communicate with that analogy? Well, who's the bride?
No, groom. Jesus.
Bridegroom is Jesus, God.
Yes. So the wedding attendants do not mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them. So as long as the groom is with everyone, they're not going to fast because he's the one being celebrated. But whenever he's absent from them, that's whenever they mourn. And this is partially tied to Jewish wedding customs, the Mediterranean wedding customs at the time. But he's saying, we're not present. You're not going to fast. We're going to be feasting. We're going to be happy, rejoicing that the Messiah is here. It's when he's taken away that they will fast more. And there's a certain sense in Jesus is present with us through the Holy Spirit, as he says. But he's also absent from us. He had to go away so that he could send the Holy Spirit, as he says in John chapter 16. Right? So he's absent from us, and it's been if you read church history from very early on, even in the first century, fasting was a pretty regular practice in many churches in the first century and onward, as a practice of spiritual devotion and longing for God's presence and spiritual discipline as well. So it's something that's done as we long for Christ to come. And it's meant to direct our thoughts to God as well. And that's Matthew 4 is talking about Jesus as he fasted for 40 days and 40 nights painlessly before he was tempted by Satan in the desert. And then our hunger constantly reminds us of God and needs, which is what Amigo said. Well, but it also frees us from the constant need to be full all the time. It teaches us, hopefully, some sense of contentment. Well, if you're like most of us, you eat about around the same amount of calories every day, about two to three meals a day. Probably you're not, maybe your body's not used to having to go without food for any periods of time. And so it's a sense of bodily discipline, spiritual discipline, that as your body feels these needs, you're psychologically okay. Because I mean, the way that our bodies are meant to work is whenever we notice we have a lack of food, we start looking for food. That's sort of how humans were made to be. But here it teaches us how to be content and not as afraid and anxious in those rare occasions where we might not have a meal readily available. So let's turn. We read this probably 4 times in this class in the past 4 months. Philippians 4:10-13. Um, I'll read it. I'll read that. So it's talking about Paul's talking about that here while he's imprisoned, and even though the Philippians church had given him a gift, he says, I didn't have to have it, but I really appreciate it. That's essentially what he's been saying. Because I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at last you have revived your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned for me, but had no opportunity to show it. Not that I am opposed to being in need, for I learned to be content with whatever I have. I know what it is like to have little, and I know what it is like to have plenty. In any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being well fed and of going hungry, of having plenty and of being in need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. So here he shows that he can go without food. He knows what it's like to be hungry and have plenty. So it helps teach us that is what fasting can help us to do. Be less worried and less bothered, and less controlled by our bodies need in that respect. And I think, does anyone in our modern world struggle with impulse control at all? Yeah, I get it. Especially when it comes to food. Rachel knows how to leave out anything that she doesn't want me to eat because I have terrible impulse control. She leaves out a brownie for very long, whatever something she made for herself. Usually, if she doesn't want me to eat it, she'll put it away. Yeah, I asked her to do that for my own sake. So I know a lot in this respect as well, and I think fasting is definitely a good practice in impulse control. Um, it helps strengthen prayer can someone okay, let's go have different people turn different passages. So Mark, can you turn to Ezra 8:23? Um, Rob, can you turn to Acts 14? And Brady, can you turn to 1 Samuel 20?
Yes.
And anyone else want to turn to Joel 2? Okay, John, can you turn to Joel 2, verse 12? And anyone would volunteer to go to Psalm 35:13? Okay, Dave, turn to Psalm 35:13. And who wants to read Isaiah 58:6-7 for us? Okay, right. Okay, I'll read that. All right, so who's got Ezra 23? Who does it? Okay, so strengthen in prayer.
So we fasted and petitioned our God about this, and He answered our prayer.
Yes, so here, and maybe the context is probably talking about rebuilding the temple and coming back to the promised land after they had been in exile. Cyrus had finally decreed that people of Judah can return to their homeland. Well, I believe that the context is in petitioning to rebuild the temple and rebuild the walls of that, if I remember correctly. So they fasted and prayed, and God granted them their request. Okay. Seeking God's guidance. So we read Acts 14:23.
So when they had appointed elders in every church, prayed and fasted, they commended them to the Lord and whom they had believed.
So here's the communal fast that whenever they're appointing elders at the church of Ephesus there. And so they had a group fast together as they were doing that. So they were seeking God's guidance in this process of appointing their leaders, as Paul went through that process. And Okay, go ahead first. Brady, I believe you have First Samuel. After First Samuel 20:34, I think.
Yeah, Jonathan got up from the table in fierce anger. On that second day of the month, he did not eat because he was grieved at his father's shameful treatment of David.
Yeah, so here it's an expression of grief and woe. Jonathan expressed that his father's actions toward his best friend David. And then there are other examples of fasting that come to grief and mourning. Repentance, and the repentance is also connected to fasting oftentimes. And even on the Day of Atonement, uh, which would happen every year in the fall for the Israel, that was the one time they were all commanded to fast in the Bible. It is the Day of Atonement, which is a time of repentance, whenever they would look forward to the atonement of their sins, the temple or tabernacle. So John, do that. So let's go to 12.
Now, therefore, says the Lord, turn to me with all your heart, fasting, with weeping, and with mourning.
So Israel is in a period of sin. He wants them to come repenting sincerely there from their sins, with and fasting as an expression of that. But there's other times whenever fasting is not commended. But we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Okay, Psalm 35:13 was that passage. Okay.
But I, when they were sick, I wore sackcloth. I afflicted myself with fasting. I prayed with head bowed on my chest.
Yeah. So here he's humbling himself before God. Again, it's in a way to strengthen prayer and express grief. So they go together in this passage. But he's humbling himself before God in this way. Again, a demonstration that I'm in need of God. It's a way of sustaining me. And now ministering to the needs of others. So, Brandon, can you read Isaiah 58:6-7?
Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry, and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not turn away from your own flesh.
Yeah. So this is a good passage because this is in the context of Lord rebuking Israel for a false kind of fasting, a fasting where the people are not really seeking the Lord in a way. So in verse 3, it says, "Why the people are speaking, the people of Israel? Why do we fast, but you do not see? We humble ourselves, but you do not notice. Look, you serve," and then that's the end of the quotes in my version translation. It says, "Look, people, you service your own interests on your fast day and oppress all your workers." So these people are fasting, but they're still oppressing those people that are laboring for them, whether it be hired workers or slaves. So they're oppressing people while they're fasting. So it's a religious hypocrisy. So we don't need to fast while also being hypocritical. In other words, we need to make sure that no matter how much fasting you do, if you're oppressing and hurting people, God doesn't care about fasting whatsoever. So that's why in the context of Brandon verses 6 and 7, it's more about making sure that if you're truly fasting, you're going to be doing these things as well. You're not going to be oppressing people. You're going to be setting them free, helping them. So, yeah, we already talked about some abuses, but maybe we can talk about some abuses. What are the people who might fast for attention? Why might people fast for attention? Approval. They might be seeking approval from maybe religious people like fast. Maybe they're fasting for that sort of approval. Boasting. Yeah, so come on, I fast twice a week. I've been fasting twice a week for 3 years straight. What are these people doing about it? Look how great I am. So it's like you're boasting about it. It kind of defeats the entire purpose of fasting is to humble yourself, not to make yourself more proud. So if you're doing it for attention, to feel good about yourself, like you're better than other people. It's not a reason to fast. And that's what Matthew 6:16 through 18. Steve, can you turn there for us? It's in the Sermon on the Mount, in a series of other things about not praying with hypocrisy, not giving alms or giving tithes with hypocrisy.
16 through what?
18.
Moreover, when you fast, do not be like the hypocrites with a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces that they may appear to men to be fasting. Surely I say to you, they have their reward. But you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who is in the secret place, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly.
Yeah. So what is it that the hypocrites do? And they fast. According to Jesus.
They want it to be known by men that they're fasting.
Yeah, so they'd make themselves poor and pitiful and sad, and it's like you get a sad count, it's a sad day. Maybe they put some sackcloth and ashes on after and look all dusty and dirty and nasty. But Jesus is not be all showy like that. Instead, act like it's a normal day. Anoint your head, wash your face, go about your day, and let your fasting be something that's done in secret, only before your Father, not as a form of virtue signaling to others. So that's what really Jesus is for.
I was gonna say that this can also be viewed as a command to fast, because it's saying when you fast. And so there's another, and it says, but when you fast, so it's basically telling people that there's an expectation that you should fast.
Yeah, I will say that's probably better. It's not technically a command, but it is sort of expected. At some point, Jesus people will be fasting. Yeah, I think that's a good inference from that Jesus assumes that his people are going to practice fasting. And whenever they do that, they need to do it like he says to do it. But I've heard this passage sort of abused somewhat. Like, it means they're like, this is why people shouldn't practice fasting at all. This is what a lot of people do. Is like, people do it out of pride, right? But it's for that same reason you shouldn't also give and you shouldn't also pray in public ever, according to that logic, because Jesus talks about those same things not being done before others. So it's okay to fast, and it's okay if another person knows about it. But it's different if another person knows about it, and you announcing to the world on X or on Facebook saying, "Hey guys, I'm fasting today." Or, "Oh, today was a really great day of fasting." I think telling other people about it in that way versus maybe doing it with others, saying, I'm trying to help you. I'm fasting and praying for you all today because of somebody else. I think there's a difference in doing that. But obviously, the only real difference that we need to have in our hearts is that we know we're not doing it for show. We reflected enough to know our motives. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that in our day and age, people do it out of contempt for the body as much. That is something that I would say is especially true in the Middle Ages and late antiquity. And
Well, but even today, it made me think of, you see these things on TV sometimes in the Middle East, people, blocking themselves, walking, parade of people doing this down the street.
yeah, that I would say there's not very common. That's like one specific sect in Catholicism.
Yeah.
I would say in America in general, probably I'd say nobody really wants to set out to hurt their own bodies. Probably it's most of the time. We usually are very.
We don't do it on purpose.
I think we don't seek out. Other people in the Middle Ages, they saw the body as a very great force of evil in and of itself. So it's self-inflicted. And I would say there's disciplining it that is a good thing, and sometimes discipline's uncomfortable, and that's fine. but seeking out to prove yourself, like literally in that case. Maybe not. Maybe it doesn't really have the benefits. But no, God will judge you, not me. Read it here, Tom.
I was just curious of the whole premise of how does it tempt for the body?
Oh yeah. Some people don't. Some people will think that the body is just I mean, there is a sense in which our bodies, our fleshly desires, can lead us to evil. There's
Like gospel system?
Yeah. Well, yes, somewhat. Like ancient, maybe modern Gnosticism. I don't know much about that, but yeah, there is a bad contempt for the body where it's just this force of evil and darkness, uh, instead of something that can be ultimately redeemed. God, by His own doing. But
Stay that way, so we.
yeah, and then there's a point where you're not spending much time focusing on God. There's also a point where if you're fasting and you're just going without food, but you're not like spending any more time praying or reading scripture or doing other parts, engaging in finding the other spiritual disciplines, it, you might just be hurt, just starving yourself for other reasons. There's not really much of a point if your mind is not trying to be directed and focused on those things, it's not helping call you to those things.
You're just going through the motion.
Yeah, and I will say, going through the motions is okay for periods of time. Like sometimes we just have bad days. Sometimes whenever I read my Bible, I don't really feel like reading my Bible. But I think it's better to practice it out of devotion for that day and realize my feelings shouldn't dictate all my actions all the time. I think but it's maybe if it's like for months and months. I mean, that you're just going through the motions and you have no desire. That's might be a little bit more cause for concern, maybe. But yeah, you don't want to just check forever for like your whole life. You don't want to just be I'm checking off my box. Maybe at the beginning it starts off like that, but you need to spend more time. Hopefully, time where you get greater focus. And if you're constantly just thinking, oh, I'm too long till I get to eat dinner, like that.
See, that would be my.
Yeah, I'll say that's fine, but as long as you can go from that, like how long is it, and then you're like, why am I doing this to myself? And then you try to remember that greater why that you told yourself at the beginning when you set out for this. That'll hopefully lead you back to be like, I need to pray. And so the reason why I waited this long is because I practice fasting at least the week I do this. So I practiced it this week, and I'll tell you this. I fasted for about 24 hours, and it was not fun at all, really. Yeah, like it was most of the time I was like near the end, the last like 4 hours, I was just feeling lightheaded. I'm not gonna try to make everything feel all great and say, oh, promise all these great things when you fast that you'll have these spiritual epiphanies all the time. That's probably not going to be the case the first several times that you fast. It's probably going to be at certain times it'll feel like you're gritting your teeth. But I will say near the end of it, as I was spending time trying to pray because I was really just wanting to eat. So I was like, I better refocus my mind right now because again, like, what's the point of just making myself hungry? So it called me back to that. And then those times where I was praying, thanksgiving to God, and I was like, man, I would not have done this if I was not fasting. I would not have been praying this much. I would not have been tuning my mind and my senses to what God is doing around me as much. And so it did have some payoff, but it wasn't, and I'm not going to say like it was fun the whole time I was doing it. And I don't want to promise to you that it's going to be this time of great awesomeness. Maybe that will be your experience, but fasting isn't all the spiritual disciplines aren't fun all the time. Life isn't going to be fun at every moment, but it does work, especially if you practice it consistently. And there's probably people in this room that have done it way more than I have more experience with this particular spiritual discipline. I think. Um, so I wanted just to talk about food. I think that it's important to talk about food in the context of fasting. Like, what is the purpose of food. I think most of us get that, maybe this part where food is meant to be enjoyed. That's really a lot of the way we think about food is just a source of pleasure. Sometimes for me, I know that I've used it because I can be a source of distraction from when I'm tired and anxious. When your kid is screaming out their lungs, and you're just like trying to cope with that stressful situation. So you might get out a bag of chips or bring your hand in the cookie jar or whatever it might be. So it can be a time that you can stress eat when you're tired, when you're bored. And that can be a lot of the times where my impulse control is done. But food is meant to be enjoyed, but maybe it's not meant to be a crutch in all those different ways that I just listed. It's meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to be enjoyed with other people. There's the reason why there are times where Jesus ate with people was meant we were meant to enjoy food together. I think it's something pleasure is not something that we're forbidden from as Christians. So food is meant to be enjoyed. It's also fuel for our bodies if you're in a more scientific sense, if you're wanting to think of it in that way. But the pleasure that we get from eating, it can help you whenever you're eating, you fast, to help you remember how good food tastes after you've been hungry for a long time. And hopefully, whenever you think about the pleasure and enjoyment you get from food, you realize that enjoyment comes from God. That enjoyment comes from Him. He made you with the ability to enjoy it, and He made this food enjoyable for you. So it's a cause for thankfulness and gratitude to be able to enjoy that food. And fasting can help with that whole process. Food shows our dependence on God. Like that verse I said in Deuteronomy chapter 8, I believe verse 4, maybe verse 9, I don't know. But it's man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. That whole process of Israel depending upon God for food in the wilderness was to show them that they need to depend upon their Savior for that. Maybe you should always eat food in a God glorifying way. In 1 Corinthians 10:31, it was partially about eating meat sacrificed to idols, and in another, like not in a worship context, but just meat that was at some point sacrificed to an idol. That was for some people that was went against their conscience. They couldn't do it, and for some people it was fine for them as long as they weren't actually worshiping that God. But they need to not cause other people to stumble and other people to hurt their own conscience. So we need to always eat food in a way that helps other people, not in a way that causes them to stumble, and in a way that glorifies God. Whether you eat or whether you drink, let it be done for the glory of God, is what Paul says there. So now I'll invite you all to talk about maybe your experience, if you have experience in fasting for spiritual purpose. I have never done a congregational fast where elders have called for people to fast and asked people to fast. Our church didn't do that, maybe like other churches might, but congregational fast is something that was practiced in one of the verses we read today in Acts chapter 14, where Paul was instituting elders. They were appointing elders in that church in Ephesus, and they had a congregational fast. In Israel, Judah had a congregational fast, and they were praying to God for the rebuilding of the walls and approval for that. So, has anyone?
We have had a congregational fast.
Oh, that's good.
I'm just letting you know that happened.
What have you heard for?
The elders.
When we were trying to decide what we were gonna have elders. It wasn't like we just invited the congregation. The elders did fast. We invited the congregation to fast with us.
And even before that, a long time ago, we've had fasts. We've also had fasts in relation to making a contribution, like fasting and praying about contribution. There was one time where we were challenged to give hilariously, like in, Second Corinthians. So there have been occasions where that has happened.
Mhm.
We actually had people in our congregation borrow money in order to give to the church.
Yeah.
So, because we were in financial difficulties. So, I'm just letting you know, there have been some examples here.
Okay.
Wanted you to realize that.
Good. And everyone else. So the congregational fasts are a thing that elders can call the church to do from time to time. I think that's probably a good thing. I think it's better to fast in community than alone. So there's also private fasts. Those are also perfectly acceptable. The private fast by yourself, which maybe what people have done in here, usually doing it for personal reasons, for spiritual discipline, and reasons like that. But I want to ask one question as we're going through this. Who has, yeah, I feel like generationally, fasting has been more talked about, I guess, by people my age and younger than it is maybe my parents. I feel like we never talked about fasting really. My parents never really talked about it, never really practiced it. Well, my dad probably did, but I just didn't know about it. But how do you think fasting? How was it practiced as you were growing up? Did you hear about that church at all?
Only when you had to have procedures like colons.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you should drink.
I think older generations, a lot of their life revolved around food. Like when my grandmother was living, I'd go to see her. And I hadn't hardly walked in the door and she would say, let me make you a pimento cheese sandwich with her homemade pimento cheese and butter in the pan with the bread. That's just what you did. Everything revolved around food.
Did they,
So you didn't hear much talk about doing without.
Well,
yeah,
she also grew up with fresh.
yeah, that's
So
what I was gonna
She
say.
did. That's what I'm saying. The
Yeah.
older generations were like that.
Yeah,
They didn't want us to suffer.
so yeah, hypothesis is that the boomers didn't really fast. They were forced to fast in certain situations. So they because they might not have had as much food or they were a little more nervous about it. And so they may not have taught. They might probably churches didn't teach it as much. You know,
Why would you want to do that?
yeah, they might not have taught it as much. But I'll say this, and I'll go so far as to be daring and say there's probably no time in church history where, and place in church history, that fasting probably should be practiced in probably 21st century America. And it was practiced by people who had much less access to this variety of foods than we do. They didn't have to practice that same sort of self-control all the time.
Well, yeah, it might have been easier in Jesus' time when
Yeah.
there wasn't a whole lot of food.
Yeah,
There's
they're
not DoorDash, fresh, hot, ready-made to your door.
yeah, there probably were aspects where it was easier.
And you had to make your food when you wanted to have your food, and if you had access to that, where we have a lot. I mean, I don't want for anything food-wise, like, I might not. There are times, like closer to payday, when it's farther away from when I was paid, can't go to the restaurant that I want to go to, but I've never. So I think it's more of a choice to do this. It's all like, I don't know if it's like more of a sacrifice now because I have access to it, where then before you had to go through a whole process in order to eat your food, to have your food. And then, I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, I guess I can only say for me, if I choose to fast, it's a choice. It's a true choice for me to fast because I can have it.
Fasting is a choice. It's a series of choices over the course of a period of time because every time resist the temptation needs a choice too. So it's a lot of choices actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I get that. And that's why I think it's probably more beneficial at this point in this place in church history than probably any other time, maybe. So I think potentially, yeah, I think it could be, it will definitely set us apart from the broader culture. We Christians were known for doing this regularly.
So the next men's breakfast, we have no food.
And do you think also because it is so foreign now to fast, like in our culture, where in that time period, fasting was more part of culture, where, because if I go out to eat with friends and I'm fasting, I would rarely choose to go out when I'm fasting, but it would be more for like, so there was a time I would say I fasted I ate whole foods. I gave up when I started the process, when I was notified that we were going towards adoption. I said, okay, well, I am going to give up and only eat whole foods, just the whole foods. So until the adoption was finalized, and that was a 2-year period. It was such a struggle because a lot of people didn't understand. I didn't tell them why. I just said I was eating healthier. But even in my like social settings, church settings, it's just a very it. I experienced a lot of confusion as to
From others.
right. Why would you be giving up, this kind of food? And, even at home, my family, because there's Christmas, there's church potlucks and Southern church potlucks, which is very different and difficult.
Yeah.
And so it's not, they don't understand that process. Or I encountered a lot of people that didn't understand that process. So.
Yeah.
But I didn't go into why. I just said it was healthier.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, that's true.
Which I imagine in Jesus's time or that time period, it would have been a lot more. Oh, okay.
Well, I don't know. Well, among religious people, probably it was normal, but not everyone was the same.
Right.
Zealous, religious, just like today. People were going about their days long. So I'm not going to say that people were. I mean, almost everyone believed in God or a God. But not everyone fasted. That's for sure.
Right. Like I know the Romans didn't. So then.
Yeah. So maybe there were specific types of time that the Romans fasted, but I don't know.
So I make the argument, especially today, because I don't think our food is near as healthy as it probably was 50 years ago. With all the ultra processed foods that what they claim to be
In our society,
what they give us.
Yeah.
country.
And then, see this book is deep. I think now there's all kinds of information of just how beneficial it is to fast periodically. And what it does for the human body. You gotta read it. I'm not gonna tell you. Do a 24-hour, you did a 24-hour fast. I did a 36-hour fast about a month or two ago. But you gotta read about periodically giving up food for extended periods of time and what it does, because you made the point where out of contempt for the body, people would do it out of contempt. But I think when he's telling us when to fast, sort of like the implication, hey, you should do this. There's because he cares about our physical being. And you read about what fasting does for your physical body, and it's pretty amazing what the human body can do.
Yeah.
What it can do for itself if you deprive it of food.
Yeah.
Not for long periods of time, but
Yeah, well, part of it was also people didn't have near as much nutrition. We have access to so many different types of food foods that their table was just bread and oil most of, like, every day. Like, they didn't have meats every meal or every day, most of the time, unless you're really rich. So you had bread a lot of the time, and maybe some other sort of, set aside chickpeas, as well.
But it wasn't processed. stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't processed, that's true. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't highly processed grains. But I will say, there's a reason why people were often shorter and had less lifespan, because they didn't eat, have as much protein.
Let's bring
I'm not trying to, I don't want to romanticize this food. Maybe it had more nutritional value if you never read it than we do for sure. But they didn't. But to get back to this and conclude there's obviously bad ways to practice fasting, and there's different ways. And I encourage you to think about that. So if you want to maybe some practical how-tos, just some tips. Don't try to plan out ahead of time. Usually, whenever you plan something ahead of time a little bit, it's easier. So don't say, "Oh, I'm going to fast today," but then you have a lunch meeting at work where you have to be eating with people. That might be a really. I mean, you can do that. There'll be one of those times where people are going to look at you funny. But maybe that's not. If you're going to try it for the first time and you're not doing it habitually yet, then maybe do it different. If you're going to do it over a period of time, say every Tuesday, I'm going fast, and your lunch meeting happens to be the day we still stay fast, that's fine. But I'll say for your first time, you want to try to make sure you try maybe
Not at Christmas or Thanksgiving.
yeah, it's like I'm going to fast today, and it's Thanksgiving. Maybe you'll fast the day after Thanksgiving. Tell yourself.
Wait till you're.
And it's leading up to Thanksgiving, so.
Yeah, maybe I'll fast 2 or 3 days after Thanksgiving. I've eaten enough food for 3 days. Anyway. We haven't talked about blood. So there's that, and then there's also that time that you would have spent eating, maybe break on your lunch break, if you're going to skip lunch that day. You're going to probably get lightheaded. Make sure that you drink water. I advocate drinking water, and I don't advocate going fast without water. I mean, if you're feel spiritually called to do that, who am I to keep you from doing that? But in general, I advise you to drink water in the summer.
Does a milkshake count as water?
No.
Is that a low calorie milkshake? Peanut butter. That's
Peanut butter milk.
Yeah, having gone without food for long periods of time and then breaking back, okay, so that Sunday morning of Father's Day, I didn't eat any breakfast that morning. And I then went to Chinese with you all. That was a mistake. I ate a lot. And then I felt my vision was cloudy. I was like, I couldn't move. But dude, this is a bad idea to break my back. Chinese food. All that grease and stuff.
Yeah, so,
Andy's food.
I had a fast when I was in college, so that was a long time ago. 40 plus years ago. We broke our fast with rice, just with a bowl of rice.
Yeah, depending on how long if you went on a 7-day fast, there's probably a specific procedure you should look into for breaking it. Maybe you shouldn't go to just big solid foods and introduce those to your gut immediately. But I'm not an expert in that. There's other people that wouldn't be maybe benefit. But I'd say at the very end, pray as you break your fast. I would say a prayer of thanksgiving to God for this process, drawing you closer to Him, and that God is working in you in ways to do this that maybe you don't even know. And so you definitely break your fast with prayer. All right. Speaking of prayer, what are our prayer requests?
Okay. So, Highly Godly says, pray